It's April 2026, and as you probably know, a book is coming out called Plea by Christopher Whitcomb. Here are some excerpts from the author's notes in the book preview on Amazon or probably other places. You can read it there. The book comes out on the 28th of April. The author indicates that after the plea occurred, an FBI colleague of his who had seen the files tipped him off to potential problems in the Idaho 4 case. In his opinion, DNA might have been mishandled, the crime scene might have been cleaned and altered, etc. Subsequently, the author received access to tons of the case evidence and data. From what we've seen and heard so far, it looks like he's confirming many of the things many of us have discussed for a long time, as well as providing details that we did not have access to. So it will be very interesting. The author points out several apparent discrepancies between the evidence he had seen and the state's case. He mentions some graphic details that I won't read here, but you can see some of them in this page. He states that FBI laboratory reports indicated the DNA profile the state focused on may have had less than 10 cells. Let me interrupt for a moment to bring up a bit of info about low cell count DNA analysis. This says a standard forensic profile usually requires about 80 cells minimum. While specialized methods can analyze amounts below 100 picograms or even 10 picograms or less, it does present limitations and challenges, especially if the sample is actually from multiple people. Remember, the state claimed that a single source DNA profile had been either found or isolated from this particular swab on the little strap of the sheath. We don't know if there was a mixture or not originally. That is all in the interpretation by the expert. Because there wasn't a trial, we didn't hear other expert opinions on this swab sample. And of course the question throughout this case was, if this particular profile could be further investigated, why not the other unknown male DNA profiles found on the sheath? The 1.2, 1.3, 1.5. And moreover, the other DNA left on the scene, such as the male DNA profile left in blood on the railing, and the unknown male DNA on the glove, etc. We know blood would have had tons of DNA. A drop of blood would have at the very least hundreds of cells. The state's excuses for not testing it were really weak. Okay. Back to his notes. He discusses how that DNA profile was first sent to the private lab, where it was traced to 4 brothers, none of whom were named Kohberger. Of course, we've discussed this for a long time. The brothers could have a different name but still be in Kohberger's family tree. Or not. The problem is that the first lab's genetic genealogy has never been publicly released in order to be compared. Of course, there are many other questions about the sheath DNA and how it got there and how the sheath got there as well. But back to the author's notes. The author mentions the chain of custody issues with the sheath, and an ISP note that actually stated the sheath was found on the floor. For anyone new to the case, the forensic photos that were released showed the sheath on the edge of the bed, with the end tucked under a victim, and this was how it was described by the state's case. So we will have to see more on that in the book. Here's a bit about the state's claim that it was Kohberger's car that entered and circled the neighborhood, etc. He says nothing in the files he reviewed showed anything like that. Here he describes X possibly being attacked 30 feet from where she was found. He describes the trail of evidence she left along the way as forensically impossible and altered. And he mentions blood spatter diluted with an unknown substance. We had seen the discussion in the forensic documents about the ISP detective diluting blood spatter with water, but it will be interesting to learn more about this unknown substance. He mentions Ethan's blood found at the top of the stairs. We remember this from the forensics. But he adds that down on the first floor there were also stains under a box of white claws. I'll repeat that. Under the box. It sounds like maybe he meant the box at the foot of the stairs, but in these pictures those don't seem to be white claws. Correct me if I'm wrong. There are some in BF's room. However, many things were moved by the detectives, so in my next video I will look up more pictures to check on that. This is very interesting about stains under a box. This is a subject I'll get into more in my next video. There were white claws upstairs. Things did get moved around a lot. He describes the lack of transfer from the upstairs to downstairs beds despite the state's narrative of there only being one perpetrator. One of the most shocking things when this came out this week was that the author mentions EC having a clump of hair in his fist. You may remember the hair we wondered about under the side of the bed in the crime scene photos. The author says the hair, labeled debris, was never examined beyond its color and length. No DNA was done. I think many of us thought the hair in the photos could have been E's. but obviously the hair, including any hair in his hand, should have been DNA identified. Here's more from a Fox Digital interview the author did. The first part is about the chain of custody issues with the knife sheath. There was discussion of this in our online community when some of the forensics reports were finally released in 2025. And here is more description regarding the hair in EC's hand. It reads that the forensics expert Brent Turvey found the hair when he traveled to Moscow to review the evidence in person. And that the FBI lab said Kohberger is excluded. We did already know from the hair and fibers report, as I covered in a previous video, that no hair or fiber was found linking Kohberger so far. Then this article from Fox Digital describes the author's background with the FBI, and as a journalist and writer. Here the author appears to confirm that the FBI did surveil or track Kohberger on his cross-country drive home for the holidays. The author debunks the prosecution's characterization of the thumbs-up selfie, taken by Kohberger. As we knew, his phone showed that he routinely took this kind of picture. Regarding the car in the neighborhood, the author confirms that the evidence did not identify the car leaving the neighborhood as Kohberger's car, nor was there evidence of where the car went. Remember when the prosecutor stated in court that the interior of Kohberger's car had been meticulously cleaned so there wasn't a trace of anything in it, implying a cover-up? He didn't actually say it was Kohberger who had done this, by the way. I'm sure many of you noticed that. It's true the car was cleaned to a forensic degree eventually, by forensic investigators. They took the car apart down to the metal, and we know from the hair and fiber report last year or so, they found no trace connecting Kohberger's car or apartment, or family home, to the crime. But regarding Kohberger's degree of cleaning, the author writes that when police searched Kohberger's car, they found empty wrappers, a Band-Aid, empty water bottles, miscellaneous receipts, spare change, and the hotel room card holder from when he drove cross-country with his dad. Anyway, there are a lot more points discussed just in the preview alone, which is already available to read online at Amazon and probably other booksellers. One useful part of the book will be the section where the author put the evidence into a chronology. Although most of us have some concept of the chronology, he reportedly had access to the phone data. Some of the entries look like our comments way back with the Linda Lane videos. There will be a lot of new detail, I'm sure. Shout out to London's Notebook. Check out her page. The book is Broken Plea by Christopher Whitcomb, and it's available for pre-order and will be out April 28 in hardback and ebook formats, probably also in your public library. It was released in a few areas already. Hopefully the book will raise awareness, and in a best-case scenario maybe the rest of the DNA will get identified. Who knows? I hope it helps to create transparency and leads to more clarity. Let me know your thoughts. And thanks for watching.